Good afternoon. My name is Carl Cooper. I'm the Director of Public Health Programs at the American Association on Health and Disability. And we want to welcome you again to another live video we're doing, a live broadcast that we're doing both on our Facebook and YouTube channels this week. And we're going to be talking about how to get the most out of your health insurance. And today's topic, we're specifically going to be looking at medical devices. Before I get into that, though, I do want to reference that today is a very special day when it comes to healthcare and people with disabilities. And that is because today, March 23rd, represents the anniversary of the passage of the Affordable Care Act. 12 years ago today, the Affordable Care Act was signed into law. And it specifically, one of the things that it did was really benefited people with disabilities to ensure that they have coverage. If you want to read more about that, I would encourage you to go ahead and check out the blog post we did on that today. I've put that in the chat for both the Facebook and YouTube streams. So please, we would encourage you to check those out so that you can read more about exactly what the Affordable Care Act means for people with disabilities. But we do want to really focus our attention today on how we get the most out of our health insurance as it relates to medical devices. We had someone lined up to speak about this today, but unfortunately, something came up and she is unavailable. So we're going to sort of switch things up a little bit. And since I do have personal experience on this myself, we're going to have me be the interview subject. And so I'm going to invite our project associate that helps us on our ACA outreach project, Nuria Paracha. She's going to come on and conduct the interview. So, Nuria, welcome, and why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hello, Carl. Hi, everyone who's joining us for the live stream. So my name is Nuria Paracha. As Carl said, I'm a project associate at AAHD. I've been with AAHD since August, and we've just been doing these outreach sort of projects. So these live events just to interview people with their background on Medicaid and marketplace plans. So today I get the privilege of interviewing Carl. I've watched him do so many, so it's interesting to be on the other end of it. But yeah, Carl, did you have anything else you want to add?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so just before we start, so we just have some, basic questions that we've done with all our live sessions. Again, this is specific to medical devices, but Carl, can you just give us some background on your disability specifically?
Sure. You've seen me do the interviews, but I haven't really talked about my disability on the live streams yet. I was born with a disability. It affects my limbs, which does then affect my mobility. My legs were extremely bow-legged at birth. I had multiple operations on them when I was a child. Ultimately, I am able to walk. I was told when I was, my parents were told when I was born that I wouldn't walk at all, but I was able to learn to walk and was able to walk for most of my life until I got in my early 30s. And then it really started deteriorating. And now I use a power wheelchair for any distance walking. So I do, when I'm in my own condo, I'm able to get around, but anything beyond that, I do require a wheelchair for anything that goes beyond just maybe like a half of a city block, I guess would probably be the equivalent of it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So just to jump into the interview now that we have that background. So just specifically, what type of coverage do you have in terms of health insurance?
Yeah, I have coverage through employment, and it is through United Healthcare. That's who my carrier is. And we've looked at various plans, both offered through AAHD and also through my wife's work. And we looked at various plans to see which one would suit best. And sometimes that does change depending on exactly, what our needs are at the moment. But specifically, the one thing that we decided on for this year was because I knew I was going to be having a new expense of actually getting a new power wheelchair.
Right. So can you you kind of went into it just now, but what do you rely mostly on your health insurance for?
Like most people, I am getting up in age where I do have some medications I take. I do have, but the main thing is my mobility limitations. I've gone through physical therapy over the years to maintain some activity so that I can still maintain my mobility somewhat. I also have taken, pain medication for that from time to time. Because of my disability, I have a rare blood condition with that that does limit what kind of pain medications I can take. So that's another thing that I always have to keep in mind. But the main thing that I have used recently is going through and getting a power wheelchair. So, for instance, I started using a power wheelchair when I was in my early 30s. I think I finally got my own chair. I don't remember the exact year, but I finally got a power wheelchair and had that one for about 8 years. And then, well, so if I do the math backwards, it was probably around 34. I guess I got my first chair. That one lasted about 8 years, and then ended up having to get another one, which lasted another 8 years, and that 8 years is just ending. So or just ended when I got the new chair. So in January, I just got a new power wheelchair, which I utilize for my mobility.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So, just in terms of with your wheelchair, we're specifically talking about medical devices. What are some issues that you've experienced? And I know that, that process is quite a bit. So, if you want to get more into that.
Yes, and it's funny because you said you started AHD in August, so you weren't even around when I
Yeah, I
started the process
wasn't.
of trying to get the chair. It's funny how that time seemed to take so long, and that's the biggest hang up I have with getting a new wheelchair is just the delays that are involved. And the reason, frankly, the chair that I had was 8 years old, and it was showing
Mhm.
its signs of being 8 years old. The seat was breaking up. The brake system didn't work that great, which of course isn't the best thing in the world.
Right, right.
The controller still worked fine, so that was not the problem. The joystick that controls the chair. But some of the other things, like for instance, the lever that makes the back of the chair go forward and backward, that had broken, and it was really difficult to operate it. So some things like that just had sort of deteriorated, just with regular wear and tear, had sort of worn down on the chair, and it was pretty beat up at that point. So that's when I started the process of getting the new chair, which was last summer. And I think it was right around the end of June. And I actually started doing Instagram stories on my Instagram account, sort of chronicling it and all the process that went through it. And ultimately, I went to a DME company at first to start the process, and they sent things to my doctor, and my doctor took forever for them to sign off on things, and I had to continually hound my doctor's office, my primary care doctor, and hound their office to get the documents back. Ultimately, that sort of caused some delays, and then finally, once we got through all of that, the DME company said, "Well, we're not going to be able to service you because the way the joystick has to be set up for me." Because my arms only go to my left arm is the longer of my two arms, and it only goes to the elbow. I had to have basically a retrofitted joystick and armrest for me to be able to reach the joystick. So a normal joystick does not work for me. They have to sort of move it back closer to where I can reach it. And the company said, well, the Jazzy, which is the company that makes the wheelchairs, no longer does the customization. So and that particular DME company I was working with didn't do the customizations either. So they had to refer me to another DME company,
Oh, wow.
who would do the customization. And I felt like I was back at square one. So I had to start all over again. So that was like 2 months into the process. And basically had to start all over again. Fortunately, they were able to give some of the information over to the new company, but then it was a matter of staying on top of, once again, they still had to get some things signed off by a provider. They had to have, the person came out to, do the evaluation. And one of the nice things that they did do when I was going through that process is they did have a therapist that was part of that evaluation. And normally that would have meant another visit to a physical therapist who would have done an evaluation and a write-up on exactly what I needed. And the DME company was real good about that, in that they arranged it so that the therapist would be available for a telehealth visit in my home while the DME rep was there going over sort of my house and what I needed within the home. So they were able to do that all in one visit. So that was fortunate that I was able to do it that way, because I think that probably saved a little time. And then they got all that through, but then the bottom line is what they were telling me is, with COVID-19, there was a lot of delays with materials and parts and shipping. So it was probably going to take a little longer to get the chair. Ultimately, I did not get the new chair until January. So that process started, I think it was right at the end of June or beginning of July. Didn't get the chair till mid January. So it took about 6.5 months from beginning to end until I got the new chair. So that's probably the biggest hang up, is just the delays that are involved in something like that.
Right. And I think especially when you mentioned taking into consideration, COVID-19, and, obviously we can utilize telehealth in that way, but there are certain things where you do need to have those parts delivered to you and to have them set up. I know that with another person that I spoke to, they mentioned how, the technicians are a really great part of, getting medical devices for if you have a disability. And they're able to just kind of troubleshoot and work with you and to make sure that that fits you perfectly to your needs. But then again, the other issue is getting that person there a time when you're available and all these other things. So just as many pros, there can be the following cons, but the important aspect of it is that you're able to get that medical device.
Yep, absolutely. It's just one of those things that I've found that you just sort of have to be a self-advocate on some of these things too,
Right.
and just stay on top of folks. Because unfortunately they'll sort of forget about you if you're not.
Yes, definitely. Our last interviewer last week, Andrea, she mentioned that she did say that how she was very much, information driven, and she was getting, everything that she could do herself and then going from there. So the materials and the resources are out there. It definitely does take that self-advocacy aspect to be able to find them and to utilize them. So again, that's what we're always speaking about here at AAHD. And then with this project is just, you are your biggest advocate and you have to be able to use those resources to your advantage. So kind of going on a more positive note on that end, what kind of tips or tricks have you learned through the years? You've had a pretty long relationship with this. What would you recommend to others? What should they do?
Yeah, the one thing I would, especially when you're talking about DME and medical equipment and devices, is recognize that lots of times there are going to be delays with getting these things approved. And
Right.
if you're going to need something, trying to start that process earlier rather than later. So for instance, when I started the process in the summer, my original thought was I was going to have to be traveling to the APHA conference in October. And I wanted to have a new chair for that because I was really concerned about my old chair going on an airplane. And I was really worried that it would not make that trip in one piece. So that's where I had started thinking, all right, I'm starting early. I'm starting several months out. I think it was about 4 months before that process, before that conference that I started the process, and thinking that would have been enough time. Well, it turned out that wasn't. Now, ultimately, the disability section for APHA decided to have their conference go fully virtual. So I was able to just stay at home. So it wasn't a problem because I didn't have to make the travel. But that's one of those things that if you're going to need something for a certain time, is make sure you're building in lots of leeway in terms of, don't expect it to get turned around quickly, that you've got to make sure that you build in extra time for something like that.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I think just with anything, especially Medicaid marketplace plans, making sure you're building in that extra time because, so many people are using these resources and these services. So it's really important to get on those deadlines or, get right before them so you're able to get what you need when you need it.
And the other thing with that is any customization that you do on that is going to add time.
Going to definitely add time, right?
Yeah. If there's something that you're going to need that's customized, include that in your calculations as you're trying to figure out maybe how long it will take, and talk to the DME provider about it and say, how long will this take? And if they say something, you probably want to add more time to that because it's probably going to be even longer than what they say.
Yeah, great advice. Thanks so much for bringing that part up. But those are all the questions that I have for you today, Carl. It was really great to interview you.
I do have one other trick that I did this year that I should probably also reference. And that was DME can be very expensive. It's not the cheapest thing in the world. And I knew I was going to have a larger copay with something like, a power wheelchair. So one of the things that we had done this year when we did through my wife's company insurance, we were able to do a flex spending account and have money taken out and put into that. We did extra this year for that reason, and her plan year runs from July 1 to June 30. So we were able to put more money into the flex spend account this year. So we were able to cover those costs through that and get the tax benefits for that, and then not have to worry about how we were going to pay that big copay when it came in too. So if people have access to that, I would encourage you. That's another thing to sort of plan ahead and think about that. If you know that you're going to have a bigger cost like that in a year, take advantage of something like that because it can save you money.
Yeah, that's another good point to bring up.
So thank you very much for interviewing me, Nuria. And it was a pleasure to have you on to do that. And, this is obviously an important topic that I think we want to make sure that people with disabilities are aware of and understand exactly how it is that they can, fully get what they can out of their health insurance plan. So thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So at this point, we're going to wrap up. We'd encourage you to join us next week. We're going to be doing an interview and looking specifically at access to specialists and hope to have a guest for you for that. We're still trying to figure out the exact time of that, but hopefully that will be next Wednesday afternoon. So look for the exact time for us when we post that. We'll put that out on our Twitter and Facebook as to when that will be. So please join us next week. And like I had referenced earlier, if you haven't had the opportunity, make sure you check out the blog post we did today recognizing the anniversary of the Affordable Care Act. And we want to especially really be thankful for what the Affordable Care Act means for people with disabilities and the important protections that it provides. So check that blog post out if you haven't had the opportunity to yet. So with that, we're going to wrap up today, and thank you all for joining us, and happy ACA anniversary.